Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Yesterday in my video, I talked about the fact that Marvel and DC really is trying to get rid of its old audience. You know, its old fanboy comic reading audience, which is typically your white guys. They're trying to get rid of them, and they're trying to replace them with a newer audience that they're trying to grow from the ground up. That is to say, they're trying to rope in little children and make them be their audience by making sure this is always with them as they grow up. But as I said in that other video, we're in this interregnum period, this period between where they are still getting rid of their old audience and trying to grow that new audience. And there is a demographic that they are trying to rope in for the present in order to shore up their sales for Marvel Comics and even for the Marvel movies that they are looking towards and trying to bring in as part of their new audience. And this demographic would be cat ladies. And no, I'm not joking. I'm being completely serious. They're trying to bring in cat ladies. So before I go too far with this, I'm going to have to define my terms a little bit and state what I would think of as a cat lady. And I acknowledge that I would be very biased in thinking about these kinds of things for pets, because I grew up in the country. You know, animals were something that stayed outside or in the barn. You know, we didn't have pets. If you had a cat, it was a barn cat because it stayed out in the barn and it killed rats and mice that tried to get into the barn. If you had a dog, it was meant to help herd up animals. You know, so I realize that I have a little bit of a bias when it comes to this. But what would I define as a cat lady? Well, I would define a cat lady as someone who replaces a family with their pets. I used to do a lot of research out of public offices, and you'd hear a lot of strange conversations, and some of those conversations would go like this. You would have two people, usually women, talking to each other, and I would think that they were talking about their children, but it turned out, as you listened to what they're saying, they were actually talking about their pets. And if you're listening to a conversation and you can't determine whether or not those people are talking about children or pets, they're cat ladies. Now, these can very easily be men as well, but I'm just going to use the term cat ladies because that's the one everybody is used to. So, since on my channel I always try to back up what I'm saying with a little bit of evidence, I'm going to go over some evidence to show you these people over at Marvel, especially, are trying to rope in cat ladies as their new audience. And you don't have to go any farther than the Captain Marvel movie in order to see this in its full glory. Goose the Cat, from the movie, is one of the major players in this movie. And when I was looking at all of the stuff that was coming out before the movie actually hit theaters, and they were putting out on the Marvel website and on the Marvel Twitter site all of the posters that they had created for the Captain Marvel movie, up there with all of the actors on their own independent posters was Goose the Cat. Quite seriously, you had Brie Larson posters, you had Samuel L. Jackson posters, you had posters with the guy that plays Coulson from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and you had Goose posters. I would say you probably had more Goose posters than any other individual besides Brie Larson, and that would include more than Samuel L. Jackson. There was also interviews that they posted on the Marvel site with Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson talking specifically about the cat. You also had, and I'm not joking about this, they also had a full 1 hour live stream with chat that they posted on the Marvel site and on YouTube of nothing but the cat. It was just the cat walking around on the floor. It was an entire hour of live stream with chat on the side. And I didn't watch the entire 1 hour. I skipped over it after it actually came out just to see if people were actually still chatting about this. You know, half an hour in, 45 minutes in, an hour in. Yeah, this chat room was full with cat ladies for an entire hour. And not only that, but they promoted this thing before they actually did it. They promoted it the day that they were doing it, and even now, weeks after the movie has come out, and almost a month since this live stream, they're still promoting it on the Marvel site and on the Marvel Twitter site with little advertisements that say, in case you missed it, if you want to see the 1 hour live stream of Goose the Cat, go over to this link. I am not joking, okay? What else we got? we got an entire line of alternate covers that are now coming out for your Marvel Comics that are specifically cat-themed alternate covers for Marvel Comics. That's what you're looking at in the background, by the way. These covers, they're actual covers put out to put on Marvel Comics to celebrate this cat theme. And of course, if you picked up a Captain Marvel comic, I don't know why you would, but if you'd picked up a Captain Marvel comic over the last couple of years, you'll know that the reason they have a lot of this going on is because Captain Marvel is a cat lady. Who would have thunk it, honestly, right? You have this woman who is specifically created as a feminist icon. She's basically feminism in the mask of being a character, and she's a cat lady. Wow, who would have thought that would happen? So if you go over to the comics, yeah, Carol Danvers is a cat lady. Captain Marvel is a cat lady. The cat's not called Goose. I can't remember what the cat is actually called, nor do I really care, but she is a cat lady. And you know, as well as I do, that Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, is supposed to be the tentpole for both Marvel Comics and now the MCU moving forward. And so this is why we have cats all over the place. Because you have this feminist cat lady being the center of the universe. Literally, for Marvel Comics and for the MCU. And just for good measure, I'll throw in a couple of other things just to show you that it's not just Captain Marvel. But you have other things like the Pet Avengers. Now, if you don't know what the Pet Avengers are, it was a comic, I think it came out in 2017. And now they put out little shorts on the internet where you have these animal and animal-like characters that are cutesy characters that are half animals, like, you know, Howard the Duck. And they put them together in what is called the Pet Avengers. What do you have? Off the top of my head, there's Lockjaw, and there's Frog Thor, and there is the Falcon that belongs to Falcon, and you have Aunt May's dog. And there's a whole bunch of these characters that are either animals or cutesy animal-like characters that are part of the Pet Avengers. And they go around saving the Marvel Universe from Thanos and other things like that. And of course, this does bleed into the cutesy pie little pet-like characters that they're trying to promote all the time over at Marvel. You have the people of the Women of Marvel podcast talking about how much they want to see Spider-Ham all over the place, and that he should have his own movie and certainly his own comic book. You have comics like Seal and Piggy, which came out last month, I think, and it's about these two characters, one a seal, another a pig, and they're like Looney Tunes characters, but in a sort of Family Guy kind of way. It's ridiculous. But the thing is that it's really easy to see why these companies, like Marvel, especially Marvel Comics, are trying to rope in cat ladies as their new audience. Why? Because the people writing Marvel Comics are cat ladies. And again, this would include the men like Sina Grace, or the fella who writes Miles Morales' Spider-Man. These people are cat ladies, and they write cat lady storylines. In the Domino comic, you have Domino, and she has this little cutesy dog now. And in the last issue, her friends, her little team, were in a graveyard, and there was a whole bunch of cats around, and she stopped to pet the cats. I mean, this is what is going on over at Marvel. Now, I'm sure you don't need me to point out the fact that this isn't going to work. This is going to crash and burn on Marvel. But I want to go into the nitty-gritty of why this is going to crash and burn on Marvel. And I'm going to do it in the way that I usually look at things. I'm going to look at it in a perspective of the hero. So the thing is that whenever I come across people who are cat ladies, it always makes me think of this quote from Plato. And Plato was writing a little bit before 400 BC, and this is what he says: "If anyone is either faithless or foolish, he is friendless. And since, as time goes on, he is found out, he is making for himself, in his woeful old age, at life's close, a complete solitude, wherein his life becomes almost equally desolate, whether his companions and children are living or dead." So what he's talking about in that little excerpt is he's talking about people who concentrate solely on themselves. People who concentrate excessively on what he calls self-love. Because self-love is a good thing to some extent. You got to take care of yourself. But excessive self-love is particularly what he is focusing on. And he's talking about the fact that if you have somebody who is completely selfish and only thinks about themselves above every other thing, well, people are not going to want to be around that person. People eventually are going to realize that you're just a selfish person. I don't want to be around you at all. Or if they do want to be around you, it's because they are just as selfish as you are, and they are using you just as much as you are using them. And so when push comes to shove and something drastic happens, like say you're dying, as he says, in your woeful old age, and you have nothing to contribute, nothing to offer these selfish people who you have surrounded yourself with, well, they're going to abandon you, obviously. And it doesn't matter if they're called your friends or your children, they're going to abandon you, and you're going to be left sad and alone, there to die. That's what's going to happen in your old age. That's what happens when you're just a purely selfish person. And what does he contrast with this? What is his point with all of this? Well, one of his points is that you need to serve something greater than yourself. And the two things that he pulls out right away to say, this is what you should serve. He says, you should serve truth and justice. This is specifically what he's talking about. And truth and justice are two things that any comic reader should actually be quite acquainted with, because I don't think that you could be a serious comic reader without having heard the phrase truth, justice, and the American way. And as comic readers, it may mean something different to me than it does to you. It may mean something a little more to me than it does to you, or more to you than it does to me. But I would say that any comic reader that is a serious comic reader and has grown up reading superhero comic books would be familiar with truth, justice, and the American way, and would actually love stories that were based upon truth, justice, and the American way. You have your hero, and when your hero is triumphant, when truth, justice, and the American way is triumphant, you feel something good within you. That is a good story. But if you look at the people over at Marvel right now that are writing these stories, well, they don't care about those things. They are these selfish people that concentrate specifically on self-love. And you can see it in their stories. Because traditionally, people writing comic books, superhero comic books, they would have these greater ideals of truth and justice. And they would take their stories and have their storylines revolve around these themes and write beautiful stories. But the people over at Marvel that are writing stories right now, they're just people who concentrate on themselves. And so the only thing that they have reference to when actually writing a story is themselves. And this is painfully obvious when you read something like Sina Grace's Iceman. Sina Grace is not writing Bobby Drake. What Sina Grace is doing over and over and over again, because he has another new Iceman #1 coming out this month, what he's doing is he's writing Sina Grace with the powers of Iceman. That's what he's doing. He's just taking himself and putting himself into the role of Bobby Drake, and that is the actual character to him, and so he's constructing his stories around himself. And he's certainly not the only one. You have Sana Amanat, when she was asked to create Miss Marvel, she was specifically told, create a character that is a reflection of yourself when you were a young girl. This is specifically the way the character was created. And that's what you have over at Marvel. You have all of these cat ladies. Because, of course, you have these people. They drank the feminist Kool-Aid so long ago, and they were told that, you don't need a family now. You go sow your wild oats. When you're, 40 or 45, then you can settle down and have a family. It'll be waiting for you because you're a woman and you can do anything. And guess what? When they got to be 40 or 45, you ain't getting a family, lady. Sorry, but that ain't happening. And so what do? Since they're stuck, sad, and alone, what do? Well, they fill up their lives with pets, and they substitute the idea of having a family for having pets, because of course pets aren't actually people and you can treat them like animals because they're animals. And so if you leave your cat alone for the day with a bowl of food on the floor, he ain't gonna die. You can't do the same with a kid. But these people, they think that these animals are their family. They substituted these animals for a family because of course they were sold these pack of lies saying that they could have everything and they just didn't need to do anything at all in order to deserve a family. It'll just come to you one day, and you go right ahead and be as selfish as you want because that's what's normal for people. These are the lies that have been sold to these people who are writing Marvel Comics, and they have nothing, and so they're a bunch of sad, selfish cat ladies. And since that's the only thing they know, because they're nothing but selfish, That's the only thing they can create a story around. And since these are the stories that they are creating, these are the kinds of people that they're trying to rope in to replace us as fans of these comics. Because they've taken the idea of truth and replaced it with empathy. They've taken the idea of justice and they've replaced it with political correctness. They've taken the idea of the American way and they've made sure that if anybody thinks it's a good thing, they're called a Nazi. And that, in a nutshell, is why comics in their present form are going to fail. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. And also, don't forget that I do comic reviews every second day. I put them as posts on the YouTube channel, so if you're looking for very short comic reviews, they're called 10-second comic reviews, you can look for those as posts from my YouTube page. Alright, I'll see you later. Bye.